a soldier, an airman, and a Marine walk into a room. This show is the punchline. My name is Ryan Smeltz, and you're watching Veteran Talk Show. All right, guys. So in case you don't know, we are an affiliate for Soldier Girl Coffee Company. I'm super excited about this because they have amazing coffee. And in future episodes, you will see us drinking Soldier Girl coffee. They also have a CBD coffee. So if you need some CBD, which helps support your health in a sense of relaxation, it helps with your sleep and your overall health on a day-to-day basis, then Soldier Girl Coffee has both that and the caffeine you need. So be sure to check out the link in the show notes. Go ahead and click that, shop around, and make sure you get yourself some Soldier Girl Coffee today. I'll do my best. Autumn, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
Nice. So thanks for coming on. Be honest with you, I told you this is 11 to 3, but you can be on as much or as little as you want. It's kind of more for us than it is the audience, if that makes sense.
Right.
But yeah, so I know you were Air Force. Our general outline is kind of just before, during, and after. So if you want to start with who you are and what you do now, then maybe we can Quentin Tarantino this and go back to the beginning.
Okay. So I guess I didn't really think this through as far as an introductory kind of thing.
Oh, you're good.
So I'm Autumn. I'm an Air Force vet. I joined in 2002 and got out in 2016. Nice. And one of those individuals that knew in my heart that I didn't want to continue because I get a lot of pushback as far as why did I get out at 14 years and didn't fulfill the remaining 6. Huh. And a lot of lessons learned along the way. I come from a first responder family. My mom was a firefighter. My dad was a paramedic. So kind of always been in my genetic code to do bigger things. My siblings are all the same way. So my stepmom was actually in the Air Force, which is why I picked the Air Force as my branch of choice. And so when I went in, it was right after 9/11. It was just kind of coincidental. So I already knew I wanted to join the military before 9/11 even happened. And so by December, I was in the DET program because I didn't want just like any job. I wanted to have a really cool job because at 18, 19, you want to do something badass. And I ended up being a weapons specialist. So my job in the Air Force was loading munitions, guns, bombs, missiles, and whatnot. So during that 14-year period, I moved around a lot. I was deployed twice. And I'm PCS like every 2 years. So had a lot of really worldly experiences. And then in 2009, I got injured. I dislocated my knee. And just a lot of wear and tear that kind of happens to all people in the military. So tried to push it out for as long as I could, but ended up changing jobs into being a manpower analyst, which is kind of like, I guess would be an equivalent to HR project manager, because we did a lot of evaluations for different bases to do their efficiency processes to see if they had enough manpower to do the job. So it's more like, did they have enough? Were people doing dual hatted positions? And we would do process evaluation. So go in and evaluate step by step how they did their job and help create efficiency practices to make it a bigger, better, stronger Air Force. And I did that about 4 years. Finished my last duty assignment was in Oklahoma. And then I ended up breaking my foot because I had the knee injury. I got really heavy into fitness and tried to counteract that. But the more I got into fitness, the more it just was wear and tear on my body. So it was just a catch-22 all around, right? So after having surgery on my foot and I kind of knew in my heart that it wasn't meant for me anymore. So I decided to not re-enlist. And I'm originally from Orlando, Florida, but I ended up in Michigan because I didn't want to go back to Florida. I felt like I what is just kind of a full circle kind of thing. And I really just wanted to do the next chapter in life. And so when I got out and I moved here, I really only knew 2 people, and they're both related to me. So when you're starting over from like ground zero, that's basically as ground zero as you can get. So my plans when I got out completely fell through in different ways I couldn't even have imagined. So kind of went through that whole homeless phase, that broke phase, that like just everything that transitioning vets go through as far as emotional stress. But I knew finding those resources by joining different organizations was going to help me get out of those situations. Yeah. So I did. I networked. I used everything that I had learned to help me get back on track. I just started getting any kind of job that would pay just to keep me afloat until I can kind of get back on my feet. And one of the most important things I did learn getting out of the military was being in my entire adult life up until that point. I had a lot of great leadership skills and I had a lot of great basic skills, but I lacked a lot of the in-between skills. So I found myself being in a position where I was overqualified and underqualified simultaneously. So it made it really, really hard to get a job, like have a new career. So I just was taking any job if anybody would hire me to kind of help fill in those blanks. And when I had gotten injured in 2009, I kind of knew in my heart that it wasn't going to last. So I started really focusing on getting my degree because I knew I could walk away with a degree and not rank. So when I got out, still having my degree wasn't enough because of experience. And so I ended up going back to grad school and getting my master's just so that way I could learn those skill sets to actually help me pave the way to a new career. So I got my MBA in human resource management and strategic management because I kind of wanted to go the business route, which led me up to my position now. Now I'm a program manager in a long-term care facility for veterans. So I lead a team of nurses to give best quality care to our veterans in their golden age. So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell my story.
That's crazy.
I know.
Right now.
So it's been quite the experience, but joining the veteran organizations is really what helped me get there because I got my job through networking, not through experience.
Hey, real quick, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right. So I must have been off.
I'm just working.
Sorry about that. I was talking to you and nothing was happening. I was like, oh, we're having technical difficulties. What's happening? That's not good.
Now I can hear you.
All right, cool. So you're still doing the human resources project management side of things currently?
In a new job with a new company. Yeah, I work for a staffing company. And so as a contract manager, but the skill sets had definitely carried over, which has helped me significantly in this job, create process improvement practices, professional development. So it has very, very much helped me what I did in the Air Force to what I do now to be successful in my job.
It's good. It's always good to hear when you can kind of translate, coming from the infantry and the Marine Corps, there was nothing, absolutely nothing that was going to translate. I remember going through SEPs and TAPs, and one of the gunnies, who was an infantry gunny, stood up at the end of the SEPs and TAPs and goes, "Is there anything for infantry guys?" And the lady goes, "Police work or contracting?" He's like, "Fuck that. I've done this for 20 years. I don't want to continue that."
Right.
That was kind of like my wake up to be like, oh, I am literally going to get out at 27 years old and be like, oh, I'm going to have to start all over again.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, if you notice too, when it comes to homeless veterans, the majority of times you see Army and Marines. You really don't see much of Navy and Air Force because the Air Force does run their branch like a business. I mean, even our service dress looks like business suits.
Yeah, not in the Marine Corps. Mm-mm.
I know.
I don't know about the Army, but the Marine Corps is definitely not that way.
Yep. And it kind of surprises me that we are not more uniform as the military, that yes, you could have, the differences between branches, but there should be more commonalities to set people up for success.
Yeah, I mean, so from my experience, the guys who I know who've been successful post Marine Corps have all they've all had like a very specific job. They weren't infantry. They were, motor T, or they were in some other support function. And then they got out and had this kind of foundation that they could go out and build on. I didn't have this. I didn't have a lot of the struggles that most people had, because I joined later in life. So I didn't go in right out of high school. I went to college for a few years. Well, okay, let's say I went to college for a year and then partied for all 4 years. So I didn't really attend much college. But then I had some life experience. And so when I got out, I was like, okay, I need to have a plan. I remember coming home the day I EAS'd and looked at my wife and was like, I'm moving to Colorado to go to college. Are you in? And she's like, yeah, okay. I've never been to college or Colorado. And I was like, all right, we're going. And so I started the process of going to college. I was like, that's going to be what I do.
I'm imagining that story if she said no, and where we would be right now.
I'd probably still be in Colorado, just working at a bar.
So Autumn, I think it's interesting how you talked about joining in 2002. I think we've talked to one or two people who, one guy joined back in the 90s.
Steven.
Yeah, that was a good time. But what was it like right after 9/11? Like, it just happened, and then you were like, this is what I got to do. And how old were you? Were you kind of like him, that you had a little life experience, or was it just like, I'm 18?
Nope, I just had been barely out of high school a year, and like I said, I had known I wanted to before 9/11 happened, but as soon as I did go, I didn't actually get in because I was waiting for a job spot. I left in May, went to basic training, and then because I was in a weaponry field, my tech school was about 6 months. So by the time I had actually got to my first duty station was in December. So I did my first deployment 4 months after I had gotten my first duty station in 2003. And by then we were really in the thick of things as far as war goes. But I worked on a bomber airplane. So where I got deployed was far away from location, because the long range jets can go long periods of time flying over to wherever they need to go, which kind of makes us the smart branches, because we can still deploy but not be anywhere in it.
Yeah, I remember talking.
To go do that.
I ran into some Air Force people at Lejeune once, and we were like, "What are you guys doing here?" And I just randomly started talking. I think we were outside the chow hall, and they were telling me, they were like, "Yeah, they were telling us all the great things about the Air Force." They're like, "Yeah, we get bonus pay for just being at Lejeune." I'm like, "Why do you get bonus pay?" It's like, "Oh, we get substandard living." I'm like, "I want to beat you up now. Like, this is how I have to live."
Air Force are the nerds and Marines are the jocks.
Yeah, seriously. I was like, oh, we're not even the cool jocks either. Those are like, we're not the quarterbacks. We're like the linemen. Like the SF guys are like the wide receivers and the quarterbacks. Like the Marines and the Army infantry are just like, yeah, just you're on the offensive line. No one's ever going to know your name.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about like I think it's interesting talking to other branches, because obviously my experience is Army, pretty typical, I guess you could say. I was an MP, so I was OSIT. It means I went in for basic training and advanced training all smushed together without any breaks in between. But I know Air Force, and of course all the other branches are a little bit different in that sense. So what were your thoughts? I mean, it kind of sounds like you were prepared when you went in. So once you got in, like, I know me personally, I didn't realize kind of what was going on until I was in the thick of it. But then I was like, oh, this isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be.
Like I said, growing up with first responders as parents, you just kind of know. And this is what as an adult now, reflecting on that, I'm like, how could you both be in such a dangerous career knowing that either one of you wouldn't come home, and what that meant for me and my siblings? But same thing as getting out. Like one of the very first questions I asked myself when I got out of the military is the same question that all veterans ask themselves: what's my purpose now? So going in with a purpose to know I had to do the hard job that not a lot of people can do or want to do, but it was more or less to prove to myself that I could, number one, and that to be the example to others that I'm not anybody special. I wasn't given anything. I have no silver spoon background, any of that nature. But if there's a will, there's a way. So that was always my purpose with the mindset going in, because that's how I was raised, you know?
See, that's a great question to ask yourself is what is my, I never asked myself that question. Like I didn't ask that. I did not get out of the Marine Corps and go, okay, what's my purpose now? My question was, all right, just what is going to keep me afloat now? Like, where do I go to kind of keep a paycheck? And I was like, well, college, because I'm going to use the GI Bill. But I don't think I ever once been like, all right, what's my purpose from getting out of the Marines? I never said, all right, what am I, like, I was always just like, okay, what am I going to do? You know?
That's what we all have in common, though. As people who join the military, we want to feel important. We want to feel like we have a purpose in our life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely. I mean, my purpose is drinking now. That's what I've done.
At least it's something. But a lot of the times, especially now, going on almost 6 years being out, a lot of the veterans I talk to, where their depression and where their social anxiety comes in, all that really stems from is the camaraderie, that lack of camaraderie they have when getting out. So talking with athletes that leave their profession too, it's like you're so used to this lifestyle, and then when it's gone, and then you're surrounded by people that love you but don't actually get you, puts you in a tough spot.
Yeah, absolutely. That is 100% accurate. Like I lost contact with, because I don't do Facebook or anything. So like when I had Facebook for a little while, but I got rid of it. And once I got rid of Facebook, probably 4 years after I got out of the Marines.
So there is,
and I just lost contact. I don't think I've talked to a single person I've served with. Well, no, I've talked to one. I've talked to one guy on the phone in the last probably 10 years. I've been out almost 10 years now. Actually, it has been 10 years. I've talked to two of my buddies came to my wedding, which was 7 years ago. And then I talked to a guy a couple of years ago on the phone. That's like pretty much it.
I'm pretty good about it.
I'm terrible at it. I'm terrible at keeping up with people. Like I've got to like make a conscious effort to be like, I should call this person.
There's someone my end and there's someone their end. So the other day at work, my buddy Matt, who I think I've known him for like 15 years now. And he was one of the ones that did a single contract. And everybody's like, oh, why aren't you re-enlisting? He's like, I am tired of getting in trouble for your DWI.
Oh yeah, especially in leadership. Did the Air Force have that where if you're in charge of someone, they mess up, it's your fault? Or is that just an Army Marine thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's across the board. Because yeah. Well, think about it like so I tell my staff now that us being an agency contracted, I'm like, one of you mess up, we're all responsible because we're the agency. It's not just one specific person. They hold me as the manager responsible for that person's discrepancy. And, I would use that example about being in the military when someone got a DUI that I might not know that person, but I'll still be in formation 6 a.m. on a Saturday, get my ass chewed for someone who made a poor decision. Yeah. There's 400 of us in their squadron. How the hell am I supposed to know that? But taking that responsibility for that wingman battle buddy concept.
Oh, when I was a boot, we all got in trouble. The whole platoon got in trouble because like 3 or 4 guys got into like we had like a DUI, a couple of like fights broke out in town over a weekend. And by the way, I was in Raleigh for that weekend, so I was not a part of any of this. Monday morning formation, we did like a 10-mile run where our platoon sergeant's like, good, you guys want to fuck around on the weekends? All right, we're gonna work today. And he just broke us off as punishment. I'm like, why am I getting punished? First of all, these guys won't listen to me because I'm a private and a boot. Like I am brand new to the Marine Corps. Like no one's listening to me. Like I'm not going to be the guys like, oh, hey guys, we shouldn't be doing this. They're going to be like, shut up, boot. Like, like, shut up, nerd. Yeah, exactly. Shut up, nerd. And we all got punished.
That's a leadership tactic, right? Because if you understand taking responsibility for someone else, when you get a high enough rank that you're responsible for a unit, for a group, a squadron, whatever, that making sure that you kind of keep an eye, like check each other's six. That's exactly what that means. And yes, sometimes that's a large number of people, but that's the skill set building along the way to keep people out of trouble.
Yeah, at 23, I did not understand that. I thought he was just being a dick for sakes of being a dick. I was like, this sucks.
I think that's one of the, and
I understand it now looking back. Yeah. But like back then, I was like, man, this is why am I getting punished for these assholes? Yeah. Like, way to Blue Falcon, everybody, guys. Way to go.
Yeah, like exactly.
We're like, why? We were woke up at like 2 or 3 a.m. because somebody did something. Like that was one of my first experiences. So I think the platoon sergeant went and handled what he got called for, and then he came to the barracks and pulled everybody out and just started yelling.
Well, that's why. So I learned that lesson when I was a boot. So when I was getting ready to EAS, or no, when I was in between deployments, we got caught for the hazing thing. I've told this story a few times. So in the Marine Corps, at least in the infantry in my unit, all the new guys have to police call. And so one day they had the boots out, police calling out in the quad, and guys were on the breezeway, like throwing pizza boxes behind them, going, "Oh, you missed the spot." And some staff NCO, like Sergeant Major, saw this and was like, "Oh, that's hazing." So we had to stand boot watch. And I'm like, okay, so now I'm in trouble for something I didn't do. So what I started doing, since I had to stand fire watch at like 1 a.m. on a breezeway in the barracks, I started walking into every boot room and turning on the light and going, "Has anybody been hazed? You been hazed? Do you have anything to report?" "No?" "Okay." I just go to the next, and I just walked up and down the breezeway doing that. I was like, I can't get in trouble for it. I'm touring my post. Like, this is what they told me to do. I'm following one of my general orders.
So Autumn, I found one, because what you talked about a second ago was like, that being a leadership tactic. So right now I have 3. I'm trying to get 4 guys that I manage, and just I'm asking you because I feel like you might have the experience, but kind of instilling that camaraderie and that team mindset and how we work together, and we're all responsible as a group without the contractual obligation of the military. Because obviously in the Army, hey, you're here, I'm in charge, you do what I say. But outside of the military, and I think I do fairly well at it, but I want to make sure that I can do that effectively, because once we take ownership of it, the business I'm in, we can offer a high quality service, and then we can take pride in that because we're better than everybody else.
So I saw this meme not too long ago that said, NCO looking for 5 volunteers. Me, why? What are we doing? Okay, now I'm looking for 4 volunteers. And that kind of stuck with me, because I was always that person that asked why or what are we doing, because I just kind of wanted to know. And now being on the other side of the fence, people want validation. They want to know that their job is relevant. So keeping people in the loop about why we do things and why it's important we fulfill our mission in our jobs or life or whatever, it gives them purpose. People naturally want purpose in some form, whether it be drinking, whether it be leading, whether it be whatever. But understanding why they're doing it is important. So keeping people in the loop, it's not even about like instructing them. It's just reminding them, hey, we're doing this for something bigger than us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say, having led, been in management for the past 6 years now, one of the hard things for me to adopt to was how to do it in the civilian world.
Yeah.
Because like leadership in the Marine Corps is like, no, motherfuckers, I'm in charge of you. Like, you're going to do what I say or there's going to be hell to pay. Yeah, and that hell to pay is going to be like,
why? Because I said so.
Because I fucking said so. Like, that's why. Because Ours is not the reason why, right? We follow, at least that's the Marine Corps mentality. Like you don't question orders. Like you learn very early on in the Marine Corps, never volunteer for anything. Like, hey, I need your example. I need 5 volunteers. Not a single hand would go up. No one would say a word. They would just stand there and look at you,
I know what
dumbfounded.
She's talking about. Huh? I know what cartoon she's talking about.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
It goes, I need 5 volunteers. Why? I need 4 volunteers.
Yeah, no, I've
that would be me. Every
you
time.
Always like when I would go to like the squad or something and be like, hey, we need 3 volunteers for the company office. I would just get blank looks. I'd be like, all right, you, and you come with me. And we're like, oh, I didn't volunteer. Well, you've been voluntold. Like,
right.
Congratulations. Like, no one volunteers in the Marine Corps for anything. Like, no one's standing up and going, be like, oh, I'll take point. Like, no one's doing that.
Because last time you volunteered, you ended up getting a uniform and sent to Paris Island.
Yeah, exactly.
No, you learn.
Yeah, you learn.
Every time you volunteer, you learn something new that makes you more effective either as a worker or as a leader.
See, I think that's the different mentality between the different branches because, well, at least in different MOSs, at least, because I'm sure that's not Marine Corps wide. I'm sure there's MOSs that probably had like volunteers all the time. But like in the infantry, if you volunteer for something, especially like knowing that you're in a combat situation, probably like, someone's going to die doing this. I don't want that. I don't want that to be me. Like, let it be somebody else. And the other thing we learned is never ask questions. Yeah. Like I can remember so many times doing like battalion or divisional talks. And at the end, the officer's always like, all right, does anybody have any questions for me before I end this? Nobody would ask. Like I might not have understood a single thing this man just told me. Like what our mission is, what we're doing. I might be so unclear on it, but I learned very early on, and everybody was this way.
Buddies later.
Yeah, don't raise. Like you saw, I remember we had a divisional like meeting once, and there was probably like 5,000 guys out there. I mean, it was insane. And the general's like, does anybody got any questions? And this one dude down, I remember sitting in the auditorium and I looked down, this one dude's got his hand up like this, and you could hear a collective like, oh, from everybody. And like he stood up and asked his questions, and someone's like, wow, he's going to get the shit kicked out of him after this because now we got to be here for another 20 minutes while this guy explains the answer to the question.
Well, yep. I did that on my very last day, right before I finaled out. In my squadron, we only had 30 people because manpower is a really small career field for the Air Force. There's only about 300 people total, and it's not an entry job. You had to take all these competency tests to get into that career field. But our 2-star from our AFSC came down. So of course my commander's there, supervisor, everybody from my squadron's there. But we had been talking about some of the changes the Air Force was making. And so when the general asked, like, anybody got any questions? And of course I didn't give a shit because it's my last day. Like I said, sir, this is my last day. Just for peace of mind, I kind of want to know.
Greatest middle finger ever. Like it's my last day. I am out of here. Literally at the end of the day, I give 0 fucks.
Well, I still wanted to know because everybody had talked about it, just amongst themselves, but nobody asked the question we were all thinking about. So I did, just on behalf, and you could just see the exorcist look from my commander like, what are you doing as the staff sergeant addressing a 2-star? And so, no kidding, I kid you not. So he's like, those are fantastic ideas and questions, because I asked like a series all at once. And he's like, and this is your last day? And I said, yes, sir. He's like, are you sure? Like, we really need to kind of have that mindset. So he actually coined me for asking us, good questions. I mean, they weren't my questions, but I did it on behalf of my peers. So it was a great way to kind of like bow out of the situation. And that really is one of those things that even led me to that point is having leaders who never volunteered and never asked those questions. They made shitty leaders because all they cared about is the money, not the responsibility of the leadership, and it showed. And here to be the staff sergeant being told to shut up and color because of my rank and not about ideas to make things better killed it for me.
Yeah.
So it made it easy to walk away at 14 years and be like, I can do so much better. Now I make more money. I have roots. I have a lot of it, accomplished so much more because I made that decision.
Nice. Yeah, I think the smartest thing I did getting out was taking, because I had good leaders and I had bad leaders. Like I had the spectrum. Like I had like I can think offhand 2 or 3 guys, if they came and knocked on my door right now and said, get your gun, we're going to go invade the gates of hell, I'd be like, all right, I'll follow you anywhere, bro. Like I'm down. Like I'll ride the crazy train with you. Let's go. Because they were amazing leaders. They were the guys who they didn't really yell that much at you. Like they talked to you, not at you. And then I had other leaders, like if they showed up and they'd be like, ring my doorbell, I wouldn't even let them say anything. I'd just slam the door in their face and be like, get the fuck off my lawn.
Be on your doorbell.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, like you have fun with that. Let me know how it goes.
Bring sunscreen.
Yeah. But I mean, I think there are some definite characteristics, and there's things that I've tried to do in the civilian world. And leading in the civilian world, there are a few things that translate in my thoughts that translate to leadership from the military, but there's a lot of things military leadership that don't translate to the civilian world. And I think that's just me. I think it's because of leadership. The one thing that I've always taken with me is, so one of the reasons we always kind of like don't ask questions in the Marine Corps was because we were always taught to be kind of independent in our decision-making process. Like, doesn't matter what's happening or what rank you are. If you're the leader on the ground and you're talking to the leader who's, you're relaying everything back to the COC, the guy on the ground makes the decision, right? So as a sergeant, you could be talking to a captain and like, look, I'm here. I know what's going on. Let me do this. Like we had that kind of independent. So you surround yourself with these people who are smart and experienced. It's why, and I'm sure the Army is this way. I'm not sure about the Air Force, but when a brand new lieutenant comes in, they always get a platoon sergeant who has been in for at least 8 years. And really that staff sergeant or gunnery sergeant is leading the platoon. It's not really the brand new officer. Like the brand new officer makes like the decisions and the calls, but he's always like everyone's always kind of looking over to that staff sergeant going, we doing this? Like, is this like, we'll say yes, sir, if you tell us, like, because you're the guy with the experience. And like the good officers understand that. They come in and they come into this experience open-minded as a learning thing. And they're like, hey, staff sergeant, I just got out of OCS and I've never deployed. And, I'm going to rely on a lot of your experience to kind of guide me through my first, whatever it is, my first leadership role, my first platoon.
I really think that officers should have at least 2 years of enlistment before they become officers. How are you supposed to be a leader if you've never followed?
Exactly.
I never been able to wrap my head around something like that, because I did. I had a young lieutenant that just could not stand me when I got in that new position. I'm like, sir, I've been in 12 years. I've been in 4 times longer. You've been in the Air Force 6 months. And yet, I know you want to do a good job and stuff like that. I said, but you've never worked around airmen. I said, you can't come in here and tell us how to do our jobs when we've been doing this for years. This is time for you to learn, not lead.
Yeah,
with all respect.
I would absolutely agree with that statement. I mean, I think out of all the officers I ever met, one of them was a Mustang. 2 of them. 2 of them were Mustangs.
Is that prior enlistment?
Yeah, so okay. Mustangs in the Marine Corps are called...
Never heard that word.
So that's what we call them.
In that context.
So Mustangs were guys who went enlisted,
those were usually the best first officers I had.
They were usually the best. I remember...
So in Iraq was a first lieutenant. She was like 40. But she did like 15 years enlisted and then went OCS or something like that. And I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
One of my officers, one of the lieutenants down at Fort Hood, she was in her 30s. She did like 5 or 10 years enlisted.
So my battalion commander in Afghanistan was prior enlisted. And then went to OCS this was years ago. And then I had a lieutenant in another platoon who was prior enlisted, who got out, did his 4 years, got out, went to college, or he didn't necessarily get out. I think he went to college with ROTC or something, and then came back as a lieutenant. Like when he checked in, he had like an Iraq campaign ribbon, combat action ribbon already. So he wasn't a true butter bar. We're like,
when the butter bar shows up stacked, and you're like, I know who you are.
Yeah, all right, I got you, bro. Like,
I get it.
We understand what this is. But no, I mean, I think I absolutely agree with you have to be able to follow before you can lead.
Yeah.
But because I had a lieutenant who thought he was the smartest guy in the world because he went to college. And I was like, bro, you got to understand, I was 18 credits shy of graduating with a bachelor. You have 18 more credits than I do. And those were pretty much liberal arts programs. Like, you are not smarter than me because you graduated from college. So like my goal very quickly in Afghanistan was like, I knew how far I could push that line before I started getting in trouble. And I would just argue with them. And I'd just be like, sir, like and it would be like mundane bullshit, like politics, something. I'm like, no, you don't understand how the world works, bro. Like, I'm older than you. I've been around. I went to college. You got nothing on me.
We had a really good lieutenant down at Fort Hood, he showed up as a butter bar. He was not prior enlisted. He was straight like college and then military. And the reason he was so good is because it was kind of funny. His father-in-law was actually my battalion commander at Fort Pope. So he was born and bred and came up in that where it was like he kind of got to see mistakes from the outside. So I don't know that is what the biggest influence was, but he knew when he got there, like most of what he did was sit back and listen.
Yeah. That's how my platoon commander in Afghanistan was that way. He came from, his father was actually, this was funny because we made a song. We made a song about it. So his dad was a Marine, like retired from the Marine Corps as an officer. His older brother was actually the XO of the company that we ripped with. During the transition. So they were leaving, we were coming in, and we were like, oh, it's the brothers. Like we started singing like the old Wayne Brothers song and stuff. We're like, chest bump, guys. Like it was pretty funny. But like he came up in that family. And so when he came into, and this was one of the best officers that I've ever served under. But when he came in, we all were like, oh, it's another butter bar, is going to think he's hot shit. And he kind of came in and was like, he talked to us like as an officer, he was like, all right, senior Marines and NCOs and staff NCOs, like, you guys have experience. I don't. Like, I get ultimately the final say, but I need you to teach me. Like, cool. All right. You're a good officer. You're a good leader because you're relying on experience and not just coming in, beating your chest like, oh, I've got a silver thing on my collar, so I'm smarter than you.
Yeah. I really think too that their degree should correlate whatever job that you get with, because just because they have a degree does not make them a good leader for whatever field they end up in. I have a female lieutenant. She was an English major, but because she was married to a pilot, she was in charge of a maintenance squadron, and we're looking at her like, they're going to eat you alive because you look like you just came from, cheerleading squad practice to an aircraft maintenance squadron where it's all dudes. They're not going to take it seriously.
I think it depends on the person. Like my platoon commander I was just talking about. I mean, he had like a hospitality, like one of like underwater basket weaving degrees. Like, but he was a very smart guy, and he was, he just kind of, it was natural. Leadership was very natural for him. But those people are so few and far between. You don't find a lot of those types of people.
Yeah. That is true.
But I could also go with, the other officers that came in with him probably should have gone to school and learned about, like, I don't know, history or something. Leadership in general. Just because you get certain degrees does not teach you leadership. It teaches you how to perform that job. Yeah, absolutely. You don't get leadership, experience getting an associate's or a bachelor's. You get the management experience. Managing and leading are two separate things. Yeah, there's a difference between a boss and a leader. Exactly. And it shows. It highly shows, and I think that's why our military is less than 1% of our population
is because we could have the potential, we just don't structure that potential.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. I think that's a very accurate statement.
I agree with that. I just finished Jocko Willink's book, Leadership and Management.
Dude, that dude is intense.
Yeah, did you see I saw him the other day? I don't know if you saw my page or not, but
so you just got back from a conference or something. So
I went to Dave Ramsey's leadership summer, and he was there.
Nice.
Is he as intense in real life as he comes across on? Because like I look at that guy when he talks on anything, whether it's his podcast, whether he's a contributor on
narrated the book. And I was like,
I got a copy of his book. Yeah.
Oh my! Is he as intense in real life?
Which one?
The SEAL leadership. The SEAL leadership tactic book, the real thick one. I haven't got to start reading it yet, but he's like just comes off as intense just because of his overall look, but the way he talks very passionately, the way that other speakers spoke very passionately about their profession and about their leadership style. And and he definitely has that leadership style that the intent is to separate the emotion from the job.
Yeah.
Because if you are emotionally attached, you miss out on certain things because you don't focus on what the big challenges are. So like when he was, just a quick note, when he was talking about putting people in these scenarios, you'll have like civilians screaming in your ear, people shooting at you, your buddies being blown up. And he actually, his operation, he hired like Hollywood theatrics and actors and stuff like that. But he said 9 times out of 10, people would help their injured comrade versus take out the actual threat. If they stop shooting at you, then you can do the next thing because it's no good if you're dead.
Yeah.
And so being able to kind of rewire your brain into leadership about what's most important and actually being able to assess the entire situation, not just what you know internally, which I thought was very insightful leadership style.
I will say that when I went back to college after the Marine Corps, the college I went to required as part of it didn't matter what your degree was, you had to go take a leadership class. And I'll never forget, it was taught by a guy who was 30 year Air Force guy, got out as like a colonel or something. Nice guy. But I remember going through. So in the Marine Corps, we had to learn our knowledge, right? We had different things that we had to like. The drill instructor would call something out. We just had to be able to memorize it. One of the things that we had to learn was the 14 leadership traits. It was kind of drilled into us. And so how we learned that was JJ did tie buckle.
14.
Yeah. There's
what now?
JJ did tie buckle. That's like the
acronym.
And yeah, I cannot remember all 14 of them. It's been so long, but it's like justice, judgment, dependability, integrity. Yeah. I went to this class and he's like, we're going to go over the 14 leadership traits. And I'm in the back of the class, like, cause I did not want to take this class because I tried to get out of it. I was like, guys, I was in the Marine Corps. Do I really have to take that? And they're like, yeah, it's not you have to take it to graduate. And I was like, but when he said we're going to go over the 14 leadership traits, it was like the second day of class. I was like, JJ did tie buckle. And he's like, yep, you're good. He's like, you already know this. I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to sleep.
That's crazy.
But it
is important though.
It is important. You have to learn, you have to learn that kind of stuff.
So
I'll tell you, with leadership though in the military, one thing that really made it hard was like, depending on who was in the leadership, they always wanted to leave their mark due to evaluations. Like, I want to be able to make it sound like I was a superstar on my evaluation, so I get my next rank and so on and so forth. But everybody underneath that, as we have adapted to that person's leadership style, whatever they changed, by the time we got trained and did it right, they moved out of that position. Someone new would come in and reinvent the wheel. So that's why I said back before about just being able to structure it appropriately. How am I ever supposed to learn how to do things right if someone keeps coming in every 2 to 4 years and changing the process just so they can look good on their evaluation without thinking what it would do to us?
I think that's why, at least from my standpoint, as a line platoon, as an infantry platoon, you would have the good officers who came in and they would have their staff NCOs and their squad leaders that they would basically rely everything on. Like, it was more on the job. They looked at their first leadership role as a platoon commander as learning and really let the staff sergeant and the squad leaders, the platoon sergeant and the squad leaders, lead the platoon. Because these are the guys who, you got to understand, when I was in, all my squad leaders pretty much had combat experience in places like Karma, Fallujah, Ramadi. These guys have been around. Like, they had seen some shit. And so, as a platoon commander, how are you going to come in, never having deployed before, and tell a dude who's maybe survived Ramadi or Karma and gone through that as an 18, 19-year-old kid, and who got that experience and survived it and took some valuable lessons away, and says, I'm going to now tell you what to do. Like, you're not as, and some officers learn real quick. Like there's kind of an unspoken rule. Hey, when you climb up my ribbons, I'll respect you, but you've got to climb up my ribbons first. Like, there was that kind of, there's that kind of unwritten rule. And I don't know if that's the same in the Army or the Air Force. But that was kind of the unwritten rule.
It is kind of depends. Like, the first time I deployed, we were in the middle of loading jets. And of course, we want everybody out of the area, minimum amount of personnel, minimum amount of exposure kind of thing. I had this first lieutenant walking through with his radio. And I guess like just in the heat of the moment, I kind of blacked out for a minute. Like, I didn't realize, I just know that I saw him. And then he was walking away. Well, after we were done loading, he had asked me to report to his office. So I'm like, oh, fuck, what did I do? And so I went with my chief to go to the lieutenant's office. And I'm just an A1C, first time deployed. And I didn't realize that this lieutenant walked in front of my bomb. I yelled, get the fuck out of the way, to a lieutenant. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it out of this. But he actually praised me. He's like, I wasn't where I belong. He's like, you kept me from getting injured. And I said, sir, did you have a safety briefing before you came on my load pad? And he goes, no, ma'am, I did not. And I'm like, well, don't do it again.
Marine on post has no friends. I mean, it's true. If you're in that billet, I mean, that's your thing. Like, that is your area. Like, if anybody, doesn't matter what they do, comes in from outside of that area, you're like, hey, get the fuck out of here. I'm a captain. I don't give a fuck. Leave. Like, you ain't supposed to be here. This is my baby.
Yep, absolutely. And having the confidence to like tactfully say them, but in the heat of the moment, when you're in the middle of war, deployed and doing things, and I'm like, get the hell out of here, take your radio somewhere else, we're busy.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
like, this is a dangerous situation.
So it sounds like, Autumn, it sounds like that was a decent example of somebody who not just recognized their place as a leader, but also made that known to you. But I'm curious, and I don't think we want to use names in these scenarios, but have you ever learned anything from a bad leader, and what was? Oh yeah. What were some?
Yep, I had a tech sergeant who, so like everybody goes through highs and lows personally, and there was one point in my enlistment that I was going through a real tough time for a personal situation, and it affected my job performance. But me trying to be that person who leaves my problems at the door, but it was kind of something that I could have dealt with better. But in being my 20s, you just work with what you know. And he had marked me down on my evaluation. He's like, well, your workload changed. And he's like, I don't know what happened to you. And I was like, yeah. And he never once asked me, like, hey, Autumn, is something wrong? Something we could talk about. I said, you just punished me and just let it go, versus actually ask me. I said, you wonder why people commit suicide, because they're trying to struggle with things alone because nobody gives a shit enough to ask when things change. This isn't normally like you, but I'm just going to let it go because it's not my business as an NCO. And I told him to his face, I'm like, I don't want to ever be a tech sergeant like you, because that's What if something would have happened? What if I would have made a poor decision because I didn't get the help I needed and you noticed there was a change but didn't address it as my supervisor? I called him out. But I've always learned, and that's how my leadership style now is. I focus on my employees. I don't focus on the residents we take care of, because if my employees feel like they're appreciated, they're more productive and they do better quality of care because they actually give a shit about them.
No.
And that's me learning from bad leaders. Because I hated that the most about being in the military, feeling like a number when I had ideas and, was very professional and wanted to make things better. And bad leadership really made it easier for me to walk away. Because it's like, I know that I can do so much better on my own than being a part of this anymore, especially the more I learn. And I'll be one of those unique individuals too, because being a female in a very male-heavy unit too, I mean, learning from my mom, being in the fire department. You were talking about hazing earlier, like just the shit that they say. And I'm like, I don't care what you got to say. I don't care if you're great, how hot I am. Just don't stop working. We'll just keep pressing forward. I didn't let that shit bother me. I didn't let that affect me as a professional. Whatever you got to say, just, that's not relevant to the situations. When you stop working, I have a problem. But those kind of things is what helped me make decisions that paved my career. Is things that I can let go and things I needed to address. Pick and choose my battles.
You choose what hill you're going to go die on. That's dude. That's something I deal with every day in leadership in the workforce. Yeah,
picking and choosing your battles.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm not only having to do that with my leadership, because I'm an executive, but I still have bosses, right? So I still got to, I've got to manage up and manage down.
Yeah. Yep, I'm a middle manager too.
So it's, so it's picking and choose. There is definitely a fine line you walk, and you're like, okay, like working in warehousing and distribution. Like one of the things I've learned over my career is that truck drivers, they love to complain. Like if it's not 100% perfect, and it's always someone else's fault. Like this sales rep or this warehouse, shift or whatever is making my life fucking miserable. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to let you do, I learned very early on, I'm going to let you just complain about it. Like, hey, come sit in my office. What's going on? All right, let's see if we can fix it. And then I just let them bitch. I just let them complain. And I'm like, this just, because that's usually all they need. It's never anything, nothing is ever perfect, right? You can never make anything 100% perfect. And sometimes they're just frustrated because look, being a delivery driver or a truck driver is very, 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 very hard. It is not an easy job to do. To go out and run a route like an Amazon driver or something, that is a very hard job. That is not, it's physically demanding. It's you're not appreciated for the most part outside of your company. You deal with customers. So when something's wrong, that's maybe not your fault. You're the one who's going to take the brunt of it. Yeah. So you're constantly getting yelled at by people that you have never met for something that's not your fault. So it's a very difficult job. So one of the things that I've found that a lot of drivers tend to do is they will, for 10 or 15 minutes, they will just complain. And you're just kind of like, all right, cool. I got it. Say whatever you need to say. Let's work this out. And if it's something I can explain, most of the time I just let it go. I'm just like, I'm not going to try and fight you on this. You are absolutely right. And let's move on.
Do you ever ask them okay, so what's our solution to this? How do we?
Oh, absolutely. Every time.
Always put that back on them. Don't come to me with a problem without some sort of idea of a solution. I don't care if it's the wrong solution. At least contribute to the conversation of what we're going to do.
I always do that. I let them do their venting things. All right, what can we do to be better? So what do you think, what will help you do your job? And then I will say 90% of the time they start to say the idea that's in their head. And as they're saying, you can kind of see people start thinking oh, that's an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah. I get clarity.
And there's those few golden nuggets that you're like, hey, that's actually a really great idea. Let's do that. All right, we'll do this. But and you just, I always let them do it. Like, that's always the end of the conversation. It's like, all right.
The drivers that I deal with are not our employees. And so, I mean, I get it. This guy,
I mean, it's hard ass work.
He was there on Thursday after 6:00 for a neighboring company. It might have been like 5:30, but either way. And the neighboring company is one guy, and he just had a kid. So, when I'm leaving, I talked to the guy. I was like, "Oh yeah, they're gone for the day, whatever." So I called the guy up, and he's like, "Yeah, I rescheduled that for Monday." I was like, "All right, cool, whatever. I'm going home. I'll see you tomorrow or whenever."
That poor delivery driver.
Friday. So that was Thursday. Yeah, it's bad enough. It's a 53-footer, and he's there at 5:30, 6:00. It's like, all right, you're kind of on the tail end of the day. But then Friday he shows up, and it's the same guy, and he comes in the warehouse, and he's like, "Hey, is that the barrel company?" And I'm like, "No." And then I'm like, "Hang on a second. I just talked to him." I said, he said he rescheduled for Monday. So dispatch
didn't do their job.
He was like, no, that would make it easy. I'm like, that is messed up, man.
Man, I'm telling you, like drivers, like anyone who's listening to this, if you ever have to deal with a delivery driver, just know if something's wrong with your shit, it's not their fault.
They get the short
straw. Don't blame them.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Delivery that was 4 pallets short one time.
That's not the driver's fault.
And the driver was like, "Yeah, I'm talking to the lady," because it's LTL.
Yeah.
So LTL is like shipper to depot, depot to depot, depot to delivery. Yeah. And the driver's like, I'm talking to the lady, and then my boss was looking into it from his end. But can you imagine how many times it's happened, and they just rip him a new athlete? I was just driving the trailer.
I used to work in alcohol, and my drivers would always go in. And so working in the alcohol world, you would get, sales reps are how they make money is on commission. So they're always overselling into an account, especially a big account. So a driver would show up with, let's say, 50 cases of wine and booze. And the store looks at him and goes, I only needed 5. I don't know why there's 50 here. I'm only going to take these 5. You can take the other 45 and put them back on your truck and take them elsewhere because I don't need them. And then they just start going after the driver like it's the driver's fault. The driver's like, "Look, man, I'm just following what's on the invoice. This is what's on your invoice. Like, this is not my fault."
And
it's a tough job.
And in the short trucks, maybe they did load it, maybe they picked it, but on a 53-footer, they're literally just behind the steering wheel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 53-foot. Yeah,
53-foot. The one dude I just talked about, he actually pulls the pallets off and brings them inside. Real nice guy, Navy veteran. I thought
I've never seen a 53-foot truck driver do that. They back in. Yep. They open the door, they back in, they go to sleep in the cab, and then we go to knock on the door and like, "You're good to go," and he just pulls out and leaves.
Yep. That's what I expect, because when they do help out, I'm like, all right, this guy's kind of cool. He's got a pallet jack. He's doing a little bit of work, but for the most part, no, unload my truck.
No, but I mean, I think that's a very important characteristic of leadership. Is that you've got to sit
I don't have to deal with truck drivers. Thank goodness.
I was thinking though, so when I was in basic training, we had the locked doors to our barracks, and of course,
lucky individual barracks.
Well, like, your female barracks, male barracks, that kind of thing. But the drill sergeant would still come to the door and show up like fake IDs, and you had to give a reporting statement to verify the IDs. But they would scream at you, and but they'd be on the other side of the door. So it was basically teaching you to have that game face of like basically angry customers. That as long as you are doing your job, doing what you're supposed to be doing, really nothing can happen to you. And that's what I coached my team now. I'm like, yeah, if someone's got a problem with you, that's their problem, not yours. You do your job to the best of your ability, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't manage other people. Like you've got to manage yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, if you want a job where you please everybody, sell ice cream. That's a Steve Jobs quote. I mean,
you like I constantly have to tell like, and I have to, so I'm not in charge of salespeople, but I constantly have to tell sales teams, you cannot please everybody. Like it is impossible.
Yep.
Like
Makes me think of
you got to have realistic expectations. You can't please everybody. You just can't.
You gotta know it's not you. You gotta not take responsibility for someone else. Yeah, you want to do a good job, but if you know you're doing a good job and you're confident, be like, I'm so sorry for your experience. I mean, really what they're looking for too is validation that there's a problem in your operation. Be like, okay, I've taken note of your experience. And then it usually kind of de-escalates the situation when you have an angry customer too, is to say, I am so sorry. I'm going to apologize on behalf of my company. I documented this discrepancy. I will send it through my chain and we will work on that to be better. I mean, that's all you really can do.
That's all you can do. Yeah. Leadership is so finicky. It's so hard. I don't think it's as hard in the military as it is in the civilian world. Because in the civilian world, like in the military, you can kind of like
civilian world, they can quit.
In the civilian, well, there's that.
they can just
be like, fuck you, bro, I'm out. But in the civilian world, it's like you can't. Sometimes in the military, and this didn't happen in my experience that often. I don't know about you guys, but I didn't get a lot of people. A lot of times he was just like, it's my way or the highway, and just kind of just start screaming at you for no fucking reason. Right. They didn't just be like, shut the fuck up and get in your face. Like, did you guys experience that in the military a lot?
Yes. So actually Jocko had a really good philosophy on it. He's wrote a book on it called Dichotomy Leadership. So basically, if my leadership style was different than someone else's leadership style, even though neither are wrong, but it causes conflict.
Huh.
So it's just kind of like, how do you work around when people have different ways to try to get to the same outcome? It becomes a lot more complex than it needed to be. So even from a customer's point of view of like, well, this could have been handled this way and you should do it this way, but yet your operation and structure is completely different of that. I mean, I'll take the feedback idea, but it doesn't always mean it works best. So working as a contractor in a facility that's run by the state and we have different styles of operating, there's times it makes my job a lot harder than it needs to be.
Well, that's government.
But I have to work through it.
Yeah, that's government work. Anything like I learned in the Marine Corps is like, never want to be involved in government work because some of it is so ridiculous.
I said that the other day at work. I made the comment that the guys were like something like, is this good or something like that? And I was like, good
enough government work.
And they looked at me like, what the hell are you talking about? And I was like, never mind. Don't.
I say that all the time. Like I look at a guy like, so I had a forklift that broke down and the guy came out and was like, well, we got to order these parts and blah, blah, blah. But I got it working and it's safe to operate, but you still need to order, we still need to order these parts and they're not going to come. And I was like, but it's running. He's like, yeah. I was like, all right, good enough for government work. And goes, you're a veteran, aren't you? And I'm like, he's like, me too. And he just walked off. I was like, all right, well, we understand each other. And my boss was like,
definitely tell.
Yeah, my boss like, is the forklift around? I'm like, it's safe to operate. We're good to go until the new parts come in. He's like, oh, okay.
On the soap that I gave you, I gave you a soap, right?
Yeah, you gave me the bar of soap. That's
on the
probably the gayest thing we've ever said to each other, by the way.
I gave you soap. It's so nice. It's man soap.
It is man soap.
It's not gay.
It's not
on the end on a few of them. I'm not sure about that one, but on the end it says mil spec, and I'm like, now you got to throw it away.
What?
Because it's mil spec. It's like saying it's military grade.
Yeah, no.
It's like, that's not as good as you think it is.
I mean, mil spec for me is baby wipes.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you guys. So I thought about this too, being out too, that of course you're talking about government, and there's always a big issue for veterans as far as the VA is concerned. Like they're always trying to find a way, and a lot of like veteran organizations, their job is to try to keep veterans from being homeless, jobless, all those things. But yet the VA, the majority of their staff are civilians. So I'm like, why would we not just hire those veterans? They're already trained, obviously smart enough to join the military, no matter what branch, that they can just train them for whatever job they need in the VA to kind of alleviate two of those problems: the level of understanding and keeping veterans from being homeless, and also keeping them employed. So,
so yes, I would agree. So this is kind of the damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because not every veteran is going to want to go work for the VA. Look, the VA has been fucked up since its inception in whatever it was, 1947. I mean, it's never been.
Being homeless, though.
Huh?
It beats being homeless.
It does beat being homeless. You know, I know. Well, I don't think there's such a broad reason for vets not working. It's not just because they're veterans. I think there is that sense of they've lost their sense of purpose. But there's a great many other things. I mean, there's PTS. There's a slew of reasons why veterans are homeless. I mean, it's not just because of one. It's like PTS, right? There's no one thing. PTS is so dependent on the individual. Like, because you're diagnosed with it doesn't mean that you are, going to hit the ground every time a car backfires, or that you're going to, beat your spouse, or you're going to like be a drug addict or abuse alcohol. Like, it's so kind of individualized. Yeah. But no, I think if you can hire veterans to be within the organization, you absolutely should.
People who get it the most, as far as the people who need help, there's that camaraderie, there's that understanding that keeps people off the street, that keeps people close to counseling. Because realistically, not everybody wants to go to counseling, talk about their feelings. So one of the best organizations I joined was a veteran organization that was just sports, because it's easier to talk to people that you play softball with than it is to go to a counselor and talk about what hurts you.
That's one of the reasons I started doing this, was because this has been a huge form of catharsis for me. Like, I haven't talked to veterans. Like, I miss talking to veterans, because I can be like, I can drop F-bombs, and I can be like, fuck this, fuck that, you're gay. Like, no one's like, oh my God, it's so offensive. Like, no one's like, like, I can talk like I was back in the military. Like, it's kind of nice to not be able to. And my mom worked in mental health for her entire career. And I'm like, I had this conversation with her the other day. I'm like, this is an act. This is better than therapy for me. This is because it's an act of catharsis. I get to sit and talk and shoot the shit and, kind of talk the way I'm used to talking without having to wear a mask. 'Cause like, in the civilian world, one of my problems for a long time in the career force, in the workforce, was I always felt like I had to be what other people thought a veteran should be. Yeah. Like, so I always felt like I had this like mask on and I couldn't be myself.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge problem with veterans. I gotta imagine I'm not the only one that does that.
No. And what's funny is how much I learned more about where I stand as a veteran. And this, like I said, we're talking with athletes. I tell the athletes, I'm like, being an athlete's what you did. I will always be a veteran till the day I die. That's kind of the silver lining between you and me.
Yeah.
And then working with people too, I realized, and I don't mean this in a negative way by any means, but I'm really not that good of a battle buddy, because I have expectations, and because I figured out how to pull myself out of bad situations. I kind of expect other people have that capability. And then, like, last year was one of the scariest years I ever went through, because
last year was a scary year for everybody. And just in general.
Mine was more than that, because part of my disability rating was having chronic headaches. And come to find out late 2019 that they found a brain tumor in the center of my brain. And
God, that's terrible.
I had brain surgery last summer, and you want to talk about the most awakening.
I'm an asshole for saying that, so sorry.
Oh, you're okay. But the reflection up to that point, people that 22 a day, it really put me on this emotional roller coaster, because I'm like, people make it so easy to have a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Here I am literally fighting for my life and thinking about, what do I do? Do I leave it in and take that risk? Do I take it out and take that risk? Because you don't know it's cancerous until you take it out. And it's like just the what I had to wrestle through mentally to coach myself through that situation, thinking about other vets and their problems and what leads them to suicide and all these other things. It made it hard for me to feel bad, because I'm like, here I am, like, I don't know if I'm going to make it to the next year.
Right.
That this could literally kill me. And now I have to actually know that. And it's not my decision was something really, really hard to cope with. And updating my will was just, I mean, it was really hard to talk about it. Now it's a lot easier, but just thinking about people who working with vets who are on the verge of suicide, PTSD, I'm all like, it can't be that easy. It can't, because here I am on the opposite side of that. Like, I have purpose now. I want to live. I want to see this through. And other people, like, I just give up. I'm like, it's hard for me to be sympathetic now because of that experience.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I get where you're coming from. I mean, that's got to be an emotional, I don't know. I think, though, being a veteran, kind of, from the veterans I know, you have a better risk assessment than most civilians, right? I think most veterans have that kind of ability through just going through the military and being like, doesn't matter what your job is, it's inherently dangerous. I mean, you didn't go to Afghanistan and get shot at, but you were dealing with explosives that God knows what could have happened to it. Like, you know, they could have dropped and, you know, who knows? Like there's an inherent risk assessment that you start to kind of go through. I think we all kind of learn that going through the military, is that we as veterans have a much different risk assessment than civilians. And so when we're faced with problems like, you know, having to fight off a disease or depression, or we kind of approach it in a much different, I think our thought process in general is much different than what a civilian would do, because our risk assessment and how we gauge that is completely different. I don't know if that was your experience. I mean, so
my mindset was like, I can fail, I can't give up.
Yeah.
So I have this expectation working with other veterans, and I really kind of got out of the helping veterans in that aspect. So I do a lot more with veterans in business, because at least then that they have something to strive for. And I just tell them, you can fail, you can't quit.
Right.
You just can't.
So
I like that saying.
I do too. And that's, I think, so I battled depression for a couple of years, not too long ago. It wasn't like right after I got out. So I was living in Louisiana, and I was drinking a bottle of bourbon in a day. Like it would be nothing to come home with a 750 of Woodford Reserve and pound it. My wife's looking at me like, yeah, you were. But yeah, I mean, I had the same kind of thought process. Okay, it's like, this is what's wrong. I can either choose to give up, or I choose not, you know, I'm going to move forward. Like, if I fail, I fail, but I'm not going to give up. So I think that just comes from being a veteran.
Yeah. But I mean, with people I do work with, I'm like, you need to find a new way to cope that's healthier for you, because alcohol is, I mean, yeah, you don't feel feelings, but at the same time,
I'm going to pause you real quick, because my wife is staring at me through the doorway like, really? You need to find a better, like, she's agreeing with you. You sound like Marge Simpson. She was empty. We have the door open. Laundry is like right there, and she was getting. You were saying what you were saying. She was just looking at me like, "Yeah, I told you." Way to validate my wife. Thank you. Not going to hear the end of that. Autumn, your fault.
I mean, trying to go through brain surgery when you're in COVID and you had to do it by yourself, like that's a new level of, oh my gosh.
I can't imagine. That's got to be awful.
I had to go out of state. I had to go to another state and see a specialist. There's only 4 in the United States. So luckily it was in my care network. But I mean, I have the most I don't give a fuck attitude more than ever. You know that movie, what is it, The Office Space, where the guy's like, that's how I feel. And I'm so much more productive because I let things go that aren't relevant.
I love that movie. I got 8 bosses, Bob. Eight, Bob. Love that movie.
Really, like that's how I was able to get through it, is coaching myself, finding the right resources, finding the right support group, finding healthy ways to get through it, made all the difference in the world, that I feel even more motivated and empowered as ever. In matter of fact, so in July, I start my doctorate program in strategy, because having a plan is.
I'm not going to call you doctor. I'm sorry. I'm just not.
Okay.
I will.
I want to teach. So that's kind of where I went. Just the whole thing. It was part of my testimony to help other people. Like, if I can do it, you can do it. And that's really the why I decided to do it, is to just show people that they can, that if they have goals in mind, that nothing stops you but you. Realistically, don't give me your bullshit excuses. Give me solutions. Because if there's a will, there's a way. Hands down.
I like that mentality overall. I'd like to amend your introduction, be something along the lines of, hi, my name is Autumn, and I'm a veteran who survived brain cancer.
Yeah, that definitely.
I feel like you could lead with that. I feel like you could lead with that.
Fortunately, very fortunate I didn't have cancer, but it was in a very, very rare place in my brain that they didn't catch it sooner because there's not research. But luckily, I found this right support group that helped me through it, and found the right neurosurgeon that did a phenomenal job. And even though it didn't cure the problem, but it made it so much better that I don't feel limited anymore.
Well, that's great.
That's the best thing, is to use that story of like, yeah, I know everybody's got problems, but at the same time, it's like how you figure out through root cause analysis your problems to get through them. They're no longer problems. That analogy, when people go through hell, you were literally going through it. Nobody stops and sightsees. They just get through it.
That is true. You go through it and you're just.
If she'd come on and led with that, I would have been like, well, I don't have anything important to say.
I mean, I've been deployed, and that was literally the scariest thing I ever gone through in my life, is having to come to peace. I might not wake up. And and I think what scared me more is not the fact that I couldn't have woke up, because I was proud of myself that the decisions I made in life, I felt like I lived and not existed, which is a lot of people. But the thing that scared me the most is to come this far in life with all these experiences and not wake up myself. To have to be dependent or brain damage or be a vegetable the rest of my life. That scared me more than anything.
Well, that's what scared. Yeah. I mean, I remember, and being a veteran, we're dependent, or not. Yeah, we're not dependent. We're very independent. We're very independent. No, but when I was in the Marines, I'll never forget. So when we were deploying, me and my 2 roommates were sitting there joking. Because we have very dark senses of humor in the military. Like, we deal with, like, in the infantry, like, we joke about like stepping on IEDs and becoming pink mist and all of, like, we joke about it because that's how, like, we kind of cope. But like, that's something no one wants to have to go through. Like, I always thought about, like, I wasn't scared to die. I was scared to get like so injured that I couldn't take care of myself. Like, that was like the big fear. Like, what happens if I get hit and I become like paralyzed below the neck down? Like, or what happens if I like lose limbs? And I actually know a guy who lost all four limbs. He was the second quadruple amputee to come home from the War on Terror. And
was it? Huh? He's the Travis Mills, I think his name is. He's a public speaker now, but he was one of the 5 living quadruple amputees.
Yeah.
He's an awesome speaker.
No, that's not the guy I know. The guy I know, his name is Todd Nicely. And I mean, he had some struggles coming home. I mean, because we would always joke about, like, if I step on an ID and like lose my leg, just fucking shoot me, like, because I don't want to do it. Yeah. And he's had to come home and adapt his life. I mean, it's a very courageous story, kind of his story of how he came home and did everything. But I mean, we used to joke about that. We used to kind of, that was just how we dealt with, I'm going into a war zone, going to get shot at, and people are going to actively try and kill me on a daily basis. Yeah. And that's how we would joke about it. So, like, hearing your story back to, I think I don't know how I would react. Like, if you came to me tomorrow and were like, you've got, cancer, we don't know, like, I don't know how I would react to it.
I just like how Autumn's like, well,
I survived brain tumor. I'm a badass bitch.
I'm going to get through this. Need to say. And I don't want to hear your introduction. Excuses. And
that
I'm just going to do
your
this
introduction,
shit.
Autumn. My name's Autumn. I'm a badass bitch. Here's why. Cardi B got nothing on me.
So speaking of that kind of story, so what Travis was talking about Todd Nicely in his speaking, but he said something that really resonated with me, that he said, all I did was go to work that day. He's like, they were deployed. They did a sweep twice. He put his backpack down right on an IUD, and then next thing you know, all these series of events happen. Oh. And it's like, when people thank me for my service and stuff, like, and my sacrifice, I'm like, I really don't feel like I didn't jump on anything. I didn't do anything super brave. I just went to work. That's all I did.
I hate that. Do you hate it when people are like, oh, thank you so much first of all, don't know how to respond.
I just say thank you for your support.
Like, I think I got
that from Matt Best, because I was like, nobody knows how to respond.
Like, I don't know how to respond to that question.
Unless they ask me if I killed someone, then I say not yet.
No, so if someone asks me I get this question all the time. Oh, you were a Marine? You were in the infantry? Did you kill anyone?
Did you ever kill anyone?
I had girls ask me this. I'd be like, oh, I don't know. How many dicks have you sucked? Like that's how I equate that question. I mean, I'm like, come on, like, that's just not something people should ask.
Like, we're walking around.
I agree with that too. And I have recruiter friends that when they got these young guys, like, I want to kill something, like, that's wrong office.
Yeah.
We just said, we don't go in and start killing shit.
Wrong office.
That's how we do business.
Go see the Marines. They'll show you where you need to go.
Right? No kidding. Just, I know when people say that they thank me for my service kind of thing, yes, I say thank you for the support. And I always, I was a little perplexed when they're like, I almost joined. And I'm like, I've never heard of that almost joined branch.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that from civilians. Like, oh, I was going to join the Army, or I was going to join the Marines, right? Blah, blah. Like, but like,
I had a recruiter who had asthma. She had an inhaler. She was a staff sergeant, and she took me out back to explain that. I can't remember the context of the conversation, but she was basically like, I went to the recruiting station, and this was still BDU era. So she probably enlisted in the 90s. And she was like, yeah, I went to the recruiting station. I was told, if you have any of these conditions, you can't join. So I lied. I got all the way through basic training, and that's really all you got to get through. Yeah. And then you can use your contacts and your inhaler and whatever. And she was like, now I just make sure to manage it.
I love the, I was going to join, but like,
I was going to join, but I got pins in my arm, but I got a limp, but I got a bad knee, but I had back surgery.
Right.
I'm like, oh, but you wanted to smoke weed instead. I got it. Like, I understand.
Yeah. And check.
My favorite excuse is, well, my mom didn't want me to, she didn't want me to die. I'm like, okay.
Nobody's mom wants their kid to join and die. Like,
I know.
That's your mom. You've got a fucked up family history.
I'd like to talk to that person.
All right, mama's boy. I'm glad.
Look, I'm not gonna lie. So
I hope for you.
So I always,
an accountant.
I always wanted to join the Marine Corps.
Autumn's like the honey badger.
She is the honey. She doesn't give a shit. Give zero fuck. No. So growing up, like when all the kids in the neighborhood would play, like we'd go off into the woods and play like Army or whatever, I would always be the Marine. Like I knew from a very young age, I always wanted to be a Marine. And so when I graduated high school, my mom convinced me to go to college. And she was like, go to college and become an officer instead of enlisting. And I'm like, I'm not ready for college, blah, blah, blah. Like because I was done with school. And she and my dad and they were able to convince me to go to college. And I did. And I wasted their money. Like that's like, I partied in college and I ended up dropping out and joining the Marine Corps anyways, just 4 years later instead of at 18. But no, I mean, that was definitely a reason I didn't join. I'm kind of glad I didn't join at 18. I went out and I worked, I went to college for like a year, like a couple of years, but I had to work through college. So I was like a masonry apprentice. I, worked in kitchens as like dishwashers and just doing like the real shit work that nobody likes to do. Right. Like, and that gave me a lot of valuable experience. And I'm very grateful that I lived that before joining. Like if I would have joined the Marine Corps at 18 in 2002, I don't have shit, man. I don't know what I would have done.
Still been in.
I probably wouldn't have been here. I don't know.
That's going to be my vote. Yeah, I graduated high school about 3 or 4 months before I turned 18.
So I graduated a few months before 19. So
I went to college. Well,
kindergarten was so fun. I went twice.
So I was homeschooled until 9th grade. So when my parents decided I was going to
that's why you're a weird person.
And now we know.
Now we know.
Now we know
so much.
I'm surprised you couldn't just tell, but they took me into
the color longer.
So my parents took me to public school. They were like, they thought they were going to take me to high school, and the school system would just be like, we'll give him a test and decide which grade he's in. Well, that's not how it worked. You showed up at the high school, and the principal was like, well, he's in high school now. So I went into 9th grade. I have no idea what grade I was actually in, but I started in 9th grade.
My God.
So I graduated early just because of my birthday. And then I don't know if I could have enlisted then or not, but I actually had a Marine recruiter to the house and had talked to him when I was like 16. And then I was going to join, and then I didn't. And then I was in college. I was on my second piece of shit car, and just, I think that had blown up. And now I'm working a job that's close enough to the house that I can ride my bicycle. And I'm like, man, I get to the end of the year. I've got all this money, and then I've got to spend it all on school. And I don't even like school. And my now brother-in-law, who at the time was dating my sister, was home on convalescent leave, which was also kind of funny because he came home on convalescent leave with uniforms because his drill sergeant didn't know any better. And he's supposed to be resting up, but he's at the recruiting station. They're getting like free help out of him because he was supposed to be, laid up. And he was like, well, why don't you come on down? So I went down to the recruiting station 1 year of college, and it was 2005. And I was like, all right, well, you guys are, I get a paycheck, I get a gun, and I get a cool uniform. So yeah, this is what I want to do. And I took a bunch of my finals early just to be able to ship. I was in the DEP program as well for, I don't know, probably like a month. But then I shipped out and I went straight to training. And I had no idea. There were no police officers or EMTs or anyone in my family. The only military I'm aware of that was in my family was my mom's father. He was 20 years retired from the Navy, and he passed away when I was like 4.
The only military I had was
no clue. I had no clue what to expect. I show up and they're screaming at me. And I was like, I just, in my mind and the way I was raised, I was like, if somebody yells at you, you do what they say. Otherwise, you don't know. I don't know what happens after yelling. So
I got
drill sergeants were yelling at me, put your face in your fucking bag. And I was like, I'm going to put my face in my bag.
My grandfather was in World War II. He was in the Army. And then I had like a second cousin who was a Marine. But I knew a lot of people that I had graduated high school with or known in life that had gone to the Marine Corps before I did.
Yeah.
So I knew those people, and they were kind of able to kind of tell me, here are the ins and outs of what you can expect at boot camp.
Yeah.
I had a buddy of mine who literally was like, you've seen the movie Full Metal Jacket. They're like, it's not as hardcore as that, but it's pretty close.
It's like that.
It's
not
pretty,
exactly.
It's kind of like that, but it's like there's just more of them doing it. And then I watched this YouTube video the other day. It's like, oh, we don't want that to be how we're viewed in the Marine Corps. And I'm like, bullshit. That's exactly what you want out of the Marine Corps.
Because there's
I don't understand the whole.
To turn it off to do the really hard job. And, I talk with people too, is like when you go to war and you have to like be up against civilians and knowing that the bad guys are using women and kids as weapons, you have to be able to make conscious decisions without emotion to do the right thing.
Oh, absolutely.
As hard as it is, but that's, referring back to that movie, I'm like, you got to see the bigger picture of like, yes, you don't want to.
You got to understand what these guys and girls are willing to go and do. Like I remember a few years ago, I read an article. So in the Marine Corps, when we were learning how to shoot automatic weapons like the 240, the 249, the belt-fed machine guns, we were taught to say a mantra in our head. Actually, we actually had to scream it out. And the mantra was die, motherfucker, die. And that was a 6 to 8 round burst out of a 249 or a 240. So when you're in training and you're learning that, you would pull the trigger back and you would, as the gun was firing, this is an open bolt belt fed machine gun, you would scream that mantra, die, motherfucker, die. You would release the trigger. You'd count 3 seconds and then you go, die, motherfucker, die. And you would be screaming that.
Yeah.
And so that's how you learn to shoot the machine gun.
Because once you get in the heat of battle, it's easy. You just say that, you pull the trigger, you wait 3 seconds.
Yeah. So that's
machine gun.
Yeah, it's talking machine gun. So, but it's also kind of doing the psychological thing in your mind. Like every time I'm pulling this trigger, I want someone on the other end of this gun to die.
Right.
Like, so you kind of trying to prepare yourself as best you can for the carnage of war. Well, I read an article, I don't know, this is probably like 5-6 years ago. They are no longer teaching that. They teach run, fuzzy bunny, run. And I'm like, let's really think about what we're doing here. You are training people to go to war, which is a terrible, terrible thing, but it happens and it will continue to happen as long as human beings exist. They are going to be killing people. And we are so worried about saying die. Like, you are training people to kill other people. Like, why are we getting into this? I couldn't understand it. I was like, why? Why are we not saying die, motherfucker, die? Like, what is, like, yes, the civilian world doesn't understand it. And I get that. But these are people who are going to go to war. They are going to see terrible things.
It all comes back to the whole thing of them. I'm sure we all have mixed opinions on this, but the Army now allowing females to wear earrings and and them having debates over whether or not transgenders can join the military. At the end of the day, the military is a big giant sports team. We don't care who you are, what you look like. We want the best. The same goes for the Rangers, Delta Force, Special Forces, Navy SEALs. I don't care if you're male or female, big, small.
You can do the fucking job. You can do the job.
If you can go out there and you can be the best of the best. Now, when we take that, just like I said, the Army came out with the ACFT, which is very similar to the fucked up PT test that you talked about.
CFT? Yeah, the CFT, which was the most retarded thing ever.
And they conducted a study where it's like, oh shit, we came out with the Army combat fitness test, and now all of our females are doing bad. So the conversation they are holding is on changing the standards. It's like, number one, I think if you put out a new test and it fails, then just go back to the old one, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, I don't think that changing the standard, because I had a female in my unit down at Fort Polk. We deployed with her. She was able to score over a 300 on the males' PT test standards. So if you're able to meet or exceed the standard, then that's okay. Those are the people that we want to participate.
So here is the debate I have gotten into with people about specifically the infantry. I don't think a lot of people understand what it means to be in the infantry. It's not a test of strength or anything. It is it is so weird because people are like, oh, you can call home, you can FaceTime with today's technology. And I'm like, yeah, but we don't have that in the infantry, especially if you were invading a country.
Yep.
If you were in a surge, like I was in the surge in Afghanistan, and it was like, hey, here's your, we had like 2 company phones for the entire company that just kind of rotated around positions. There was no internet. There were no comforts. I mean, the comfort you had was like, you got a tent and you could sleep on the floor, and then eventually you got cots.
That's 5-star right
but
there.
That was like a 5-star deployment. Like that was like, oh, this is nice.
We got cots.
We got fucking cots. I don't know. When they were talking about changing the infantry up and how it was, I was like, you guys are asking this on a question of strength and physical aptitude, which is wrong. Anyone can do it. Like women, men, gay, straight, whatever. Anybody can do it if they put their mind to it. Like I can go on a 25-mile hike. I can put one foot in front of the other. Anybody can put that in their brain and do it, regardless of what their physical or.
Well, look what first responders do. So the police academy, the fire academy, it's not gender specific. It's can you do the job?
Yeah,
with
exactly.
This, like 70-pound gear, 200 psi hose, blah blah blah. Take down bad guys 3 times your size.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody can do it if they put their mind to it.
That's the number one question: is can you do the job?
Can you do the job? And that should be the question. But what people don't realize is that in the infantry, and I'm like, this is not special forces. I've seen the compounds how SEALs live. Like they have hardcore motherfucking jobs. They deploy for very long periods of time, but they aren't the guys who are living in a foxhole. They don't go into a place, dig a hole, and live there for the next 10 months.
Yeah.
That's not their deployment. And that's not what they should be doing. Same with Rangers, same with, maybe the Green Berets. Delta Force isn't doing it, but like infantry guys, that's what like the 18, 19-year-old infantry person is doing. Like they're bullet sponges. They are going out, they are setting into a place, they are digging a hole, and it's like this hole is going to be for now, and then hopefully tomorrow I'll be over there in a new hole.
Yeah.
And there is no privacy. There is no I used to take shits in ammo cans. Like I would take an empty wooden ammo crate set it down, put a bag in there, pull my pants down, talk to you while I'm doing it. She'd be like, yeah, this is where I'm this is where I'm taking a shit. Like out here in front of everybody. Like there is no privacy in the infantry. There is absolutely zero privacy. There is no and no one.
I'm sorry. So kind of back to what you said about die, motherfucker, die. People don't realize that it takes that negative reinforcement to really unlock their true potential, what they're capable of doing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So as you were saying, like your reasonings to join the military. So when I was approaching graduating high school, I asked my mother, who's a firefighter, I said, hey, I'm about to graduate. Do you have any money for college? Save for me. But because I was a BC student, she no kidding, laughed in my face. Like, I didn't even think that she would graduate. Like, she has these high expectations because of the kind of person she is. Does badass things. I mean, my mom's smaller than me. She drove the fire truck. She was an engineer. She retired as a lieutenant. So she was a legit, no kidding, badass goal getter. So that's kind of where all this comes from. But I remember that moment when it was like, you seriously didn't think I was going to have a future? Go fuck yourself. So why I joined? Because I didn't want to struggle. And to this day, I have never, out of all my siblings, have never borrowed a dime from my parents, ever, to get me out of situations because of the negative reinforcement that unlocked my true potential of what I can do. So to your point, I mean, I think that made all the difference of having to break people down to build them back up to see what they're really made of. Now, if my mom would have coddled me and been like, that's okay, I probably wouldn't be the person I am today. I'm her firstborn. She dropped me off at that recruiter station, was like, see you later. Other moms are there crying. Oh, my baby. No, and mom's like, but I didn't talk to her for probably 6 months after that, just to prove a point of like, all right, you want to be done being a parent or let me sink or swim now that I'm 18? I will show you.
See, we were latchkey kids, my sister and I. So we were raised. I mean, we come from a divorced family. I mean, my parents got divorced when I was very young, but we were raised by both of them to be very, very independent. It's kind of like I talk to people about growing up who are my age, and I'm like, oh man, you had a way different childhood than I had, because I was raised to be like off on my own. Like when I went to college, I had the loan. Like it was on me to go to college. Like, yes, right. My parents convinced me to go to college, but I was the one that took the loan out and went to college. Like my parents weren't like, here's a check for, and of course, college back then was much more affordable than it is now. College now is like fucking insane. But my parents were like, when you turn 18, like we want the best for you and we want to see you succeed, and we like will give you advice and guide you, but ultimately it's your decision. I mean, yes, my mom was one of the ones that cried when I told her I joined the Marines. I was like, because I called her and told her, I was like, hey, I just signed the contract to go in the Marine Corps, and she was like, why? And for her, I mean, she had a high school sweetheart. Her high school sweetheart was killed in Nam. And so like that brought up a lot of, that triggered her. And so she didn't want to have to live through that. So I get, that's really why she cried. But like my dad was like, yeah, you fucking should have done this like 4 years ago. I don't know why it took you this long to do it. Like, I'm like, thanks, Dad. Love you too. But no, we were raised very, very independent. Like I moved, like my sister moved to New York on her own. I moved to Colorado after the Marine Corps I had my wife, but we didn't know anybody in Colorado. When we moved out there, we were like, we're going there and this is what we're doing. Like that enabled me to move to Louisiana without knowing anyone. So, I mean, I was raised to be very, very, my mom lives 15 minutes away, but we maybe get together for dinner every so often. That's about it.
Yeah.
I think to my point, my story was just like, if it weren't for the fact that I was offended by my own mother, like I really didn't have hope for you to make something of yourself because you don't make straight A's like your sisters. That looking back, I still joke with my sister now that if you asked my mom when I was 19, she probably envisioned me living in a trailer with 4 kids, 2 different baby daddies, the stereotypical, a bad situation in her mind kind of thing. And I wanted to prove her wrong. So my drive into the military wasn't on a positive, I want to do great things for my country. It's kind of like, if I can do it, being basically looking at like a loser to my own mother, that I'm going to prove you wrong. You tell me that I can't, I'm going to show you that I can.
Well, I think joining the military, I've known so many people who have, it's so individualistic why you join. Like me, yeah. I was bored. I was a bored 22-year-old who was like getting nothing out of life. Like, it wasn't like I wanted like mom, God, and the apple pie. I knew people who wanted to get out of trailer parks and the inner city. And like
I
the
didn't
Marine
grow up
Corps.
in a trailer park, though. I grew up in a good family that my mom is very well for herself. She could have paid for my college if she wanted to, but the rest of my siblings, we all found a way to get our college paid for, because it's like, how are you supposed to appreciate it if you don't earn it yourself?
I mean, I did meet, and I'm sure you did, and I'm sure, Ryan, you did. Like, we all met people that were, I'm here for mom, God, the apple pie, the American flag, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I think that's in every branch.
The Lieutenant Dan.
The Lieutenant Dan, yeah. I mean, but yeah, there were those people too that was like, like my platoon commander in Afghanistan, like dad did it, brother did it, granddad did it. Like
every male in my family has been in the military.
Exactly. But I think there were so many more people who were either craving the independence and wanting to do their own thing, or they've always been independent and they were just kind of like, well, this is what I'm going to go and do. I mean, there's such a dichotomy of people who join the military. I don't think it is. I remember going to my freshman year in college after getting out, my first year back at school. And I heard we were talking about military stuff in one of my classes. And there was this young lady who was like 18 or 19 years old. So she knew everything, of course. Because at 18 and 19 years old, we all know everything.
We're the smartest.
We're the smartest people in the world. But she said, she was like, well, people join the military because they are this. And it was like they are super conservative, patriotic, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, that is absolutely wrong. Shut the fuck up, you dumb asshole. Like, but you meet, I think, a lot of different people. I think you see a dichotomy, a true cross section of this country. You see people who are, come from really good families. You see people who are incredibly poor. You meet, like, I had the pleasure to serve with people who were doing it to get their citizenship. Yeah. Like I knew guys who were like, I'm from, Cancun, Mexico, born and raised, and I'm doing this to get, on a pathway to citizenship. It's just such a dichotomy.
People who tried to get out of it, that made it hard for me. Like, I wanted to throat punch people. It's like, well, how do I get out of this deployment? But why are you here?
Yeah,
what do you think was going on? I only joined to go to college. Really? I worked with one guy that only joined the military. Yeah, I had one guy who only joined to be part of Tops and Blue. Why we have a Tops and Blue in the military? I'm like, that's not even a good use of money. You're basically a military chorus. Why? And then those who say that they joined the military and they were in the band, I'm like, okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I hated the band people. So we had the Marine Corps band, which practices it, which plays for the White House. And they were like, oh, we're in the Marine Corps band. And I'm like, you do realize you're still the band geeks that everybody wants to beat up.
Yeah. But I'm in the Marine.
I do have some friends in the band that I love them, but it's still like that first time you heard that and you're like, what?
I joined the Marine Corps to play. Like, I couldn't. So
play drum.
I think my biggest question of the Marines or Air Force band is, because we have an Army band.
Marine Corps is the best.
Why do we need more than one?
Well, so you're right, because the Marine Corps band is the only one that plays at the White House. So
I
don't know.
Have that one.
Yeah, exactly. Get rid of all
Army and want to be in the band, then you gotta
Dude, I remember, like, I can remember meeting guys like at 8th and I, which is like it's an infantry unit. Like, you had to like go through infantry training to get to 8th and I, but they're the guys who like do the silent drill, do all of that. And I'm like, why would you do all of this to go to 8th and I? Like, that's fucking terrible. Like, why? Why would you do that? Like, when I joined the Marine Corps, I took the ASVAB and my recruiter's like, you could have any job in the Marine Corps. What job do you want? Like, he's like, give me 3 jobs. Give me your wish list. I was like, bro, if I'm joining the Marine Corps,
infantry,
like, yeah, if I'm joining, like, I told him, I was like, infantry, recon, snipers. And he's like, well, those are all O3 or infantry based MOSs. You've got to give me different. And I was like, I looked at him, I was like, bro, you're not obviously getting what I'm trying to tell you here. It's infantry or nothing. Because for me, it was like, if I'm going to join the Marine Corps, I'm going into the infantry. There's no other point join the Marine Corps. And so when I would meet other people in the Marine Corps who were like, oh, I wanted to be in the band or in the admin, or I'm like, why would you go through all of this to like have a desk job? Like, why?
Yeah.
You could do that in the Army. You could do that in the Navy. You could do that like in any other branch. Like, why would you do this?
Think about being in my position, being a female, when females are like less than 20% of the entire military population, having to fight that stigma, you know? And it's like, you want to be in weaponry, you want to be in maintenance, you want to like, you don't belong here, but having to earn your right to be there because everybody's going to have purpose at some point in time. And as many times I PCS being that FNG every single time, you know, with just the comments, the rumors, the whatnot. And I was so easygoing about it, like hearing rumors. And it's kind of like, damn, I did that. What else did I do? I'm insane.
Dude, the rumor mill in the military is insane. Like, I cannot tell you how many times like Jennifer Lopez or someone like some celebrity died while I was deployed.
Yeah.
Like, the rumor mill is insane.
How many?
Like, I took everything with a grain of salt. Like, I would hear something about somebody and be like, dude, did you personally witness that? No? Then it's not true.
Autumn,
Yeah.
how many duty stations did you see while you were in?
So I'm originally from Orlando, Florida. I started out in Lackland, Texas for about 9 months. Then I went to Shepherd, which is Fort Worth. Then I went to Ellsworth, which is in Rapid City, South Dakota. Went to Germany for 2 years. Then I went to Whiteman, Missouri for 2 years. Went to Eglin for 2 years. Went to Korea for a year. And then I was in Oklahoma for 3.5 years.
What part of Germany?
Spangalum.
Oh, okay.
I was in the wrong branch.
I was in Baumholder for 2 years. I was MCOM, so us and the Air Force got the shared barracks. So we got the nice.
Yeah, if you want to go somewhere, if you want to go overseas and be have a duty station in like a nice place, you either need to be an embassy guard, which is the lamest shit ever from what I've been told, or not join the Marine Corps.
I know. I love it when people try to give me shit about being in the Air Force. They're like, oh, the chair force. I'm like, excuse me, but that chair's called a pilot seat saving your ass when you're calling airstrike. You're welcome.
Chair force. I make fun of all the branches equally.
I mean, I
make fun of the Marine Corps guys who were pogues.
Because I was in Germany for 2 years, and I made friends in the Navy, the Air Force. I was 20 minutes from launch stool, so
yeah, but not a single Marine.
That's not true. That's not true.
There are Marines there?
Launch stool is the main hospital in Germany.
Oh,
so injured Marines.
Oh, well, that doesn't count. They weren't stationed there.
No, they got
the duty stations you can get
and flown
the
to
duty
Germany.
stations you can get in the Marine Corps are Camp Lejeune, Camp Pendleton, Okinawa, which is being closed down and moved to Guam, which is even worse, or Hawaii. And Hawaii is very, very, very small. It's part of the 3rd Division, which is split between Okinawa and Hawaii. So there's not a big branch. That's it. 29 Palms. Those are your duty stations. That is your choice. Jacksonville, North Carolina, San Diego, California, Mojave Desert. Like, that's pretty much it. Like, we aren't like, oh, we're going to send you to Korea. Like, that's not a thing for us.
I mean, the Army complains a lot about variety as well. But Miami is a very small possibility. I believe as an MP, I believe there are 30 of them there.
You guys don't even know how good you guys have it.
My buddy Tyler, as a staff sergeant, finally got assigned to Miami. So,
well, I joined the Marine Corps. I was like, well, Iraq's going to be ending soon. I'll probably go on a MEU. I want to do infantry, so I may get one combat deployment. I was like, I'll go on a MEU and see the world because, we get to do that. Nope. Not at all for me. Like, it was, here's Iraq, here's Afghanistan. There you go. That's and then you get to be stationed at Camp Lejeune. And Jacksonville, you've been to Fayetteville?
Yeah.
Right? Jacksonville's worse than Fayetteville.
I don't believe you.
Go to Jacksonville. It's way worse.
What was your worst duty station, Autumn?
I guess it would depend on the context. So, like, the worse the location, the better unit I have, because we had such a tighter bond with our squadron since there wasn't a whole lot to do. So we had a much better camaraderie. But if it was like a bigger city area, so like when I was stationed in Florida, there was so much to do that the unit was not. It was a shitty job. Even because in Florida, we weren't all close. Everybody just kind of did their own thing. But when I was like in Oklahoma and Missouri, because there wasn't a lot to do, we were all closer together and treat each other like family because we were each other's entertainment. We would hang out at each other's houses or do barbecues and stuff like that. So it really wasn't anything bad as far as whether location or the type of people I worked with. It was just moments. But
we're losing video, it looks like. Yeah. You froze. You still here?
Sorry. I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah. So
you guys are lucky. Like, you guys get to have the only way you can have a really cool duty station.
It's mentality, to be honest with you.
Is what?
Mentality.
It is what you make it.
Dude, you haven't been to 29 Palms.
I mean, I'm just saying, you talk all about the Marine Corps and how you were like, that's what I want to do. I feel like that's something you would be aware of. Because when I enlisted, I feel like part of the reason I ended up in the Army is because the Marine office was closed that day. But
no, I had always wanted. So I joined the Marine Corps.
About the military, I was like,
so I wanted to test myself, and I knew that. First of all, I thought that if I went in Special Forces, I was going to have to do a career like 20 years, because I'm not going to go through that kind of training and not make 20 years. And I didn't know if I could survive the training. So I was like, I'm going to join the hardest branch that there is for just everybody. It is the same for like the hardest basic training you can find was the Marine Corps. Still is, in my opinion.
It's 13 weeks long.
It's 13 weeks long.
Yeah. Army's only 9.
And it's and you don't have contact to the outside world. Your only contact is physically writing a letter. I mean, you don't get phone calls. You don't get, it's tough training. It's really hard training, especially if it's something you're not used to. Like you don't know what to expect. I mean, you're not allowed to say I or me for 13 weeks. Or us or we. You have to say this recruit. For 13 weeks, that's what you say. But that's why I joined. It was a challenge for me. And I wanted to join the Marine Corps because it was supposed to be, and I think it is the hardest branch to join.
Yeah.
Just to get through basic.
Is it mildly disappointing to know that people don't differentiate the type of Marine you are? They just assume that, if you're a Marine, whether you did desk jockey or infantry, it's still the same. Like they just see Marine. They don't know what you went through, the extent with your MOS. They're like, you're a Marine, you're a badass.
That is very disappointing. Especially after going through it, because the Pogue Marines would be like, we're all riflemen. I'd be like, no, the fuck you aren't. You touch your rifle once a year, you son of a bitch. Like,
every man is a rifleman.
No, yeah, that is kind of disheartening. I mean, it people are like, oh, all Marines are like, for some odd reason. So, but I get it. Before the Marine Corps, like I thought all Marines were like completely badass. 100% of like, if you wore the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, you were a straight badass motherfucker. Didn't matter.
Then you met the tuba player,
and then I went into the Marine Corps, and I was like, no.
I can't tell you how many people thought I was a pilot, just because I was Air Force, and of course, me, I go with it. They're like, what kind of planes did you fly? And I'd throw out like area codes. I'd be like, 810s and 352s, and nobody knows.
I'm not going to lie. This is what I thought the Air Force was before I joined the military. I thought if you were an officer, you were a pilot. If you were enlisted, you worked on the plane. Like that was pretty much like that was the whole Air Force. Like that's what I thought before I actually got into the military and realized, oh, there is a plethora of jobs you could have. Like,
yeah.
I thought,
like I said, they run like a business. You could be finance, you could be personnel, you could be lawyers.
I thought, for whatever reason, like the Army guarded the Air Force bases.
No.
The Air Force worked on their plane. Like the enlisted guys, were the mechanics for the planes. The officers were all the pilots. The Army also had tanks and an infantry unit. And then the Marine Corps was like a notch below Special Forces. Like they were Special Forces light, is what I kind of thought going into it.
Interesting.
Which was that's what I thought. I was like, so the Marines are, so you can have a Marine battalion anywhere in the world. Like, this is going to get me into a lot of trouble with Rangers. They say Rangers lead the way. Bullshit. Rangers can't be anywhere in the world within 6 hours of something happening. Marines can. You can have an entire infantry battalion anywhere in the world within 6 hours.
That's because they're already halfway there.
That's because they're on Muse. They don't take an act of Congress. They are the only unit that the president can go Marines. Like it doesn't take an act of Congress to get Marines to go somewhere.
So because of that, I feel like
Marines are the tip of the spear. They can go anywhere in the world and they can be there within 6 hours.
Yeah, but
with people's mentality as civilians, I like to ask people when I tell them I was prior service, and I like to see what they would guess. I'm like, well, what branch do you think I was in? Just because of what they know about the military, and it's kind of funny, of the answers I get, because I'm a lifter. So they're like, you were a Marine, you're built like a Marine. I'm like, I appreciate the compliment, but no.
Look at me. I'm not built like a Marine. People would look at me and be like, you were in the military? Really? Are you sure? I think this is a stolen valor moment. And I'm like, no, it's not. I was actually in the Marines.
I think it's funny too, because they're like, were you Air Force? Because you're hot like Air Force. Air Force has pretty good looking women. I'm like, thanks.
The Air Force does have the best looking women. No,
Marines are super fit. Air Force are super hot. I don't know.
I just find it funny about people's what correlates them to the military.
Yeah,
I think the Navy. I don't know. The Navy is such
a little bit of everything.
I feel like the Navy and the Army are the same way. You get a little bit of everything. Like in the Air Force, I look like when I think about the Air Force, I'm like, those are the naturally good looking people.
Yep.
So in our service dress.
Yeah,
it's uncomfortable as hell because it's made from low grade couch material, but pull it off.
I think it's across the board.
I think the Marine Corps. I mean, when I think of the Marine Corps, I'm like, yeah, you are either like a hideous human being physically, or you are dumb as rocks.
That's
or both.
Or both.
That's funny.
Or both. Like you eat lots of crayon. Like, first of all, I don't get the crayon joke, but I also understand the crayon. Like, oh, Marines eat crayons. And I'm like,
I don't know where it originated.
I don't know where it originated, but yes, if you told us to eat crayons, we probably would.
But the guy in
very disciplined.
He started crayons ready to eat. He's a Marine.
Yeah. You know, he's steering into the skid on that one.
Yeah. 100%.
That is what he is doing. No, so like Air Force, you have to be incredibly smart. So like I'd look at like Air Force is the brainiacs. Then you have the Navy, which is like Air Force are the geniuses. Navy are like the AP kids, like they were in AP all through high school. Then you have the Army, which is just a good collection of society. You've got really smart people. You've got some dumb shits, you know, because you did have a movie called In the Army Now with Pauly Shore. And that's pretty accurate. Yeah, that shows our age. You know that movie. Stripes, which was another great movie about the Army.
Phenomenal movie.
And then you have Marines who are just like
we had a girl who
Hulk smash. I mean, that's what the Marine Corps is. Hulk smash.
We had a girl that said,
"Buddy, we didn't bring up space, and I still wonder if it's still a thing."
What was that?
We didn't talk about Space Force, and I still wonder if that's still a thing. Space Force.
Oh, Space Force. Is Space Force still a thing?
It is. It is. And I have seen
we're talking about it.
No. I have seen and heard of people who are part of Space Force. They wear.
I want them on their show.
Most of them are.
What are you doing?
That were like kind of transitioned over, but
yeah.
I mean, still.
So they were the smartest of the smart.
Yeah, but if you think about it, like Space Force not having.
Have you met anyone in Space Force, Autumn?
Nope.
I
wouldn't even know what they do.
I thought it was something they talked about and that they were going to create. They just haven't actually created it yet.
It is. It has been created. That's my new goal. I'm going to get somebody from Space Force on here.
Dude, when they come on this show, we have to play something from Star Wars. Dun, 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 dun. Like, we have to do something from Star Wars.
That'll get us in trouble.
And it's funny with Memorial Day coming up, you're just kind of like, we want to be supportive of any branch that the government comes up with. You know, they almost joined a branch, maybe.
Here we are making fun of Space Force, and we haven't even mentioned the Coast Guard. Exactly. Like Coast Guard doesn't even get made fun of with us.
They know it.
They do. So when I was in college, actually the leadership class, the colonel, the former colonel from the Air Force was like, "Do we have any veterans?" There's like a handful of us that raised our hands.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, he starts like, oh, branches, where are you from?" So like Army, Navy. Got to me, I was like Marines. And he got to this guy who's in the front row. He's like, Coast Guard. And the guy goes, "Yeah, you don't really count though, do you?" I was like,
Coast Guard, but I said veterans.
Yeah. Those Coast Guard guys are like.
How I feel about the National Guard. So during the pandemic,
the National Guard with the Army. Like, I'm like, oh, you're kind of like Army, but you're like a Marine reservist, right?
I
like
you're like the Rick Moranis of Ghostbusters, where like Rick Moranis is putting on the Ghostbusters suit, and I'm like, that's National Guard.
That is, you know what? That is 100% accurate. And that needs to be, all right, advertising idea here for the National Guard. That is 100% accurate. That is what the National Guard is. But like, they're a part of the Army.
That is great.
Like the Puddle Pirates. They're not part of shit. Like,
well, yeah, but
they like state fishermen. Good for them.
People say Coast Guard and then National Guard, but National Guard is a component of
The Army. Coast Guard is just like they guard the coast.
And reservists are a component of the Marines or
Army
Army
or maybe or whatever.
Still, there's a difference between a component and a branch.
The Coast Guard is its. So here's what I'll say.
I don't know. Nobody knows what the Coast Guard is. I've actually met a person who was in the Coast Guard.
I know. I have a friend who was in the Coast Guard. He's moving up here to North Carolina.
You should bring him over, please.
I used to bust his balls all the time about being in the Coast Guard. I wish
we could have somebody from the Coast Guard on here because I'm.
Did you tell him? Did you think he was out in the ocean kicking rafts, saying, "Hey, country's full"? Sorry.
No, he literally looked and was like, "I'm in the security forces for the Coast Guard," and I was like, "So what does that mean exactly? Like what?"
You guard
There's
water.
A security force for the Coast Guard. He's like, "Yeah, I do interdictions," and I'm like, "It's for what?" He's like, interdictions. I'm like, I don't know what that means. Interdictions. What? He's like, "Oh, well, we board vessels," and I'm like, "So you're pretty much like pulling boats over that are going too fast and giving them tickets." And he was like, "Fuck you."
That's funny.
I was like, it's not a branch of service, but it is the hardest service to get into, to be honest. Like they don't do active recruiting.
Right.
Really?
Yeah, they don't do active recruiting.
I had a guy tell me after I got out of the Army, I was like, "Yeah, I'm trying to get back in." He was like, "Oh, you should go Coast Guard." After I got out of the Army, I went Coast Guard.
So they take the highest ASVAB score.
He's the one guy. That's the one guy.
Apparently, the Coast Guard takes the highest ASVAB score, and they are very particular about who they take. So if there are 10 people that go in and try and get into the Coast Guard, they may take one of them.
Which is
and
interesting.
I'm like, what the fuck do you guys do? Like, what is it you are doing?
Nobody knows what they do.
Other than jumping out of helicopters to save drowning fishermen, which, let's be real, is a very important job and should be done. But that's like 7 people. Like, why do you need a whole...
Do they even have uniforms?
Yeah, they look like Air Force.
I'm surprised that like Border Patrol isn't a branch because of that. It's so important.
Well, that's exactly right. Like, if you're going to have a Coast Guard, why don't you have Border Patrol? Why is that?
Exactly.
Well, no, Border Patrol. I think that falls under DOD.
It does, but it's not a branch. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but they still have all the access that DOD people have, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, so it's basically like military affiliate without actually being labeled that way. It's more like agents, like FBI, CIA, something like that. But I mean, surprisingly, because of you're talking about national defense, how it would not be another subsection of what our military would be built off of.
Well, so I know the Coast Guard can be deployed and has been deployed to conflict zones. Like they were in the Persian Gulf. They participated in World War II. But it's weird. I don't know how they. What the fuck do they do when they deploy?
Guard.
Pretend to be Air Force,
I guess. Oh, you're in the Air Force. No, this is actually a Coast Guard uniform.
We're in the Coast Guard.
It's funny you say that because the Air Force uniforms have changed to the Army uniforms, and I tell all my friends now, I'm like, "This is like you sold out."
Oh, that's right. You have the tiger stripes now. You've got like
we got rid of the tiger stripes. Now we have the same exact uniform as the Army.
Like the OCPs.
Whatever, OCP or whatever. I don't know what it's called. But they look the same. Only the name tag's different and the rank's different.
Yeah, you're the only ones that have your chevrons pointing downward, which is so weird to me. I never understood why the chevrons point down.
Because it looks like wings.
That does make sense. And I don't know the first thing about Air Force rank. I remember seeing a guy who was like, he had like 20 fucking stripes pointing down.
I did.
And I was like, when I was the fuck are you?
when I was deployed
it's only
Iraq,
5 before it becomes a tower.
Is it 5? No, I saw it was huge. I mean, it was like
because it's got
like
the rooftop. then it would be a cheat because it gets more like, no, it would only be 5.
Is it 5? Like, I remember the guy, like, we were in the 7-day store, and like, we were, you know, as lower enlisted, you say, when you see a higher rank, you're like, good morning, Staff Sergeant. Good morning, Sergeant Major, whatever. Morning, Master Guns.
Nope. It's 5 is an E7, and then it tiers the rooftop. So E8, E9, so forth. And so it'll be Master Sergeant, Senior Master Sergeant, Chief. And then it'll get the cool stuff in the middle, like the Reef, the Star, whatever. But it's only 5 underneath. It just looks bigger the more top they have.
There was an Air Force girl in Iraq, and she was like, I think, a medic for the detainees. And so I worked proper for the first month and a half I was there. So we would eat together in the chow hall. And I just remember, in my mind, she was like so high ranking because she had all these stripes.
Right? It's not just me that says they have that Air Force has a lot of stripes.
I was like, oh yeah, you're like in E6 or E7 or something like that. And she was like, no, I'm an E5, and I was like, what?
Yeah, E5 is only 4 stripes.
It's like,
yeah, but they're like, well, I think the difference is, so here's the weird thing is, like, Army puts it like right on the collar, like right here in the breastplate,
on the chest. Now, and when I enlisted, it was on the collar.
So Air Force puts it on the sleeve, but they're like huge. So it's not like, and it's on their it's on the BDUs, right? It's on the cami. Like, you guys have it right here in the center of your chest. I'm losing my microphone.
I feel like that was true, but now if they have the OCPs like the Army has, then everything's on the chest.
Is it on the chest now? Do you know, Autumn?
I don't know. I wasn't in. I had got out the same year that I think those uniforms were introduced.
So the Marine Corps puts their shit on their collars, and they're black. So if you're in winter and you're in your greens, and you're walking around in your camis and your greens in wintertime, you see someone coming up to you, all you can see is a black blur on their collar. You don't know if they've got an exploding bomb in the center, if they've got crossfire. So you don't know if this is a master sergeant, a master gunner. You have no idea. Sergeant major, you have no idea what's walking up to you until he gets to like right here.
Yeah.
And you can see this thing that's like that big. And you're like, oh, that's cross rifles. All right. Master guns. By the time they get it, and you're just like, I'm sorry.
It was the same in the Army when it was on the collar.
Like, you can't see shit on the collar in the Marine Corps.
It was like, oh, look, they got something black on their collar.
They keep it that way so that the senior enlisted guys can yell at the lower enlisted guys. I'm goddamn Master Sergeant. I'm goddamn Master Guns. Yelling loud words.
Hey, fellas, so my phone is dying. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah. It was great talking to you.
Thanks for coming on.
We enjoyed it. Thank you.
We do this for hours on end, so.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I absolutely love talking about it and sharing my experiences because I would always hope it helps someone get through some of their challenges the same way I got through mine.
Definitely. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for coming on. Come down and visit us in North Carolina if you ever get a chance.
Yeah.
Sounds like a plan. I've always wanted to see it. I've never been.
It's a beautiful state. It is.
Well, I will keep that in mind. Thanks, guys, for your time.
Thanks, Autumn.
Bye. Have a good one.
You too.
This is the Veteran Talk Show. If you or someone you love is suffering as a victim of sexual harassment, sexual assault, needs help with addiction and recovery, or mental health and well-being, then please go to veterantalkshow.com/resources. This show is hosted, produced, and edited by Ryan Smeltz. Our co-host is Joe Ballack, and a guest starring veterans.